This is Arkies in the Beltway, your look at national politics and the Arkansans influencing the discussions. I'm Alex Thomas, Washington Correspondent for the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, reporting from the nation's capital. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Arkies in the Beltway for the week of June 29th, 2025. The clock is running for Congressional Republicans. The Senate and House of Representatives hope to meet President Donald Trump's July 4th deadline for passing their sweeping tax and spending measure, but Senate Republicans have struggled over the last week to put their bill together. Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth MacDonough has rejected several provisions, ruling certain language violates the Senate's rules on measures affecting revenue and spending. The Senate can pass measures on revenue and spending with a simple majority vote, rather than the 60 votes necessary for most bills. Republicans control both chambers, but they only hold 53 seats in the Senate. MacDonough's decisions mean Senate Republicans have had to rework their original language or drop question provisions. Congressional Republicans face pushback for attempting to pass this sweeping measure, and not just from their Democratic colleagues. People from across the country traveled to Capitol Hill last week to protest the bill, highlighting concerns about how the final package could affect nutrition assistance and Medicaid. Laura Fries joined others with Arkansas community organizations, hoping to get lawmakers' attention. The elementary school teacher from Valonia had never been to Washington before this trip.
Arkansas is kind of a low-income state, and especially in the small rural towns where I live and work. People don't have a large income, so this is really going to affect them.
Fries and other protesters congregated in the Dirksen Senate office building before heading across the Capitol. Popular Democracy co-executive director Analilia Mejia called on advocates to be what she described as agents of change.
What we fight for is humanity. What we fight for is justice. What we fight for is a popular democracy. All right?
Congressional Republicans are hoping to use their policy package to implement changes to SNAP, the nation's largest nutrition assistance program. Around 42 million Americans, including 241,000 Arkansans, participate in the program. Arkansas Senator John Boozman and the Senate Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee put in charge of drafting this portion of the Senate's legislation. The Senate parliamentarian approved revised language last week, mandating states pay a portion of food benefit cost for the first time. States would additionally face more expenses for operating SNAP, rather than the federal government covering half of these costs. Sharon Parrott serves as president of the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, a left-leaning policy think tank. She says states are not prepared to handle more SNAP cost. She adds state governments could face tough choices resulting in fewer benefits, or even states withdrawing from the program.
The reality that states could end SNAP programs entirely means that for the first time in 50 years, basic food assistance may be entirely unavailable in some states, leaving kids and seniors, parents and workers, veterans and people with disabilities without the help they need to afford food.
Fries is worried about how children in rural communities would fare under the proposed SNAP changes. Her own students come to mind.
I've had students the last 2 or 3 years that I've had to bring food into my classroom just because they come to school so hungry.
The Senate text would also limit SNAP benefits to American citizens and people lawfully allowed to live in the United States, leaving people like refugees unable to access the program. Arkansas's Marshallese population would still qualify for SNAP, as people from the Marshall Islands can live in the U.S. lawfully through the nation's shared compact of free association. The Senate Agriculture Committee additionally followed their House counterparts in using the proposal to address agriculture programs for the first time in 7 years. Farmers and other producers want Congress to update the farm safety net, as lawmakers remain unable to pass a new farm bill replacing the standing 2018 law. Boozman's committee had to resubmit its language on SNAP after MacDonough struck down the initial proposal. The Senate Finance Committee and Republican leaders are reviewing provisions on Medicaid after the parliamentarian rejected several proposed changes to the program, including a limit on provider taxes funding health spending. State and federal governments work together on Medicaid to provide health care coverage to low-income Americans. More than 734,000 Arkansans are enrolled in Medicaid. Work in the Senate follows the House's approval of cutting $793 billion in Medicaid spending over the next 10 years. Advocates are worried how that cut could affect healthcare access and cost nationwide. Hattie Temple of North Little Rock was among last week's demonstrators. She uses an inhaler, which she says she can only afford through Medicaid.
If I don't have my Medicaid, I can't pay for that medicine and pay my bills.
The proposed changes to SNAP and Medicaid, as well as other spending reductions, are being coupled with an extension of the 2017 tax law, an accomplishment of the first Trump presidency. Democratic Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon was not shy in his assessment of the effort when speaking before demonstrators.
I think this is the most morally bankrupt bill I've ever seen. So here's where we are. We got to go out and win this fight by showing the Republican senators and Americans across the country how the bill is going to harm the neighbors and communities.
Wyden argued the Republican proposal will determine the future of health care in the United States.
Are you for caviar or kids? Yes! Are you for Mar-a-Lago or the middle class?
Middle class.
Are you for hedge funds or health care?
Health care.
All right, I'm starting to like this poll. I know what side you're on. Now we got to make sure that a whole lot of Senate Republicans make the right choice too.
Fellow Democrat Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy also addressed the demonstrators. He compared the last week to Republicans' campaign to repeal Obamacare, which ultimately ended in 2017 after Senate Republicans failed to repeal the law.
Recent history tells us that even when it feels like we're up against 0 hour, even when it feels like they're marshaling their final votes, nothing is over until it's over.
Members of the House left Capitol Hill at the end of last week. If the Senate does approve its tax and spending package, House members will have 48 hours to return to Washington to consider the legislation. And that'll do it for this edition of Arkies in the Beltway for the week of June 29th, 2025. You can stay up to date with all news involving Arkansas at arkansasonline.com. Special thanks, as always, to the team down in Little Rock. I'm Alex Thomas, and this has been Arkies in the Beltway. Thanks for listening.